Welcome and good afternoon. This is Commish Orr. Today I'm going to give a little update on my Payoff Pitch Baseball project. And we're about at the quarter of the way through the season 2 of that project right now. So I thought I'd give you a little update on that. And how the recently released Legends and Busts Payoff Pitch set is going to affect this league moving forward. So first of all, let's just give a little update on where we're at about a quarter of the way through. I say a quarter of the way through. I play for this Payoff Pitch project. I'm doing 1/3 of a season, 54 games. This is season 2. Season 1 was last year, and so I'm a quarter of the way through season 2 right now. And just as a recap, for those who may be new, or maybe this is your first video on this that you're watching, I have 4 teams in the American League and 4 teams in the National League. 3 of the 4 teams are made up of Hall of Famers in each league. And then the 4th team is made up of great players not in the Hall of Fame. So, for example, Mark McGwire, Pete Rose, Barry Bonds. They have to be retired, but they cannot be in the Hall of Fame in order to be on that 4th team. So that's kind of what we're looking at for the breakdown of how the league is. Now, the Detroit Rockets are the American League team made up of non-Hall of Famers. And the Chicago Docs are the National League team made up of non-Hall of Famers. The other 3 teams in each league are made up of Hall of Famers. And I gave them all fictional names in real cities and created logos for them and all that fun stuff. In any event, quarter way through here, 13 or 14 games played, and we see that the Boston Splinters are in first place in the American League with a 10-3 record. And the Houston Hoots are the National League leader with a 9-5 record. And so let's take a look at the stats. I'll blow this up so everybody can see it better. So as you can see, overall, American League offense is way high. The overall American League batting average is .294 and ERA is 6.27. I expect that will come down. It is true in season 1 that the American League was a more offense-heavy league than the National League, but not quite this much. So I think that'll come down. And even this week, in this week's games, I play 4 games. During this project, every week that I play during this project, I play 4 games. With 8 teams, that means I'm playing basically a full set of games. And even this week, the run totals were down from this 627. So this has actually dropped a little bit to 627. But as you can see, the Boston Splinters are hitting 307. They have the best ERA in the American League, but it's 5.69, so it's not great. And if we look in the National League, batting average is .247, ERAs of 3.98. It's more in the realm of the expected, I would say. And you have Houston, who is leading in both those categories, .280 batting average, 2.92 ERA. So let's take a look at the league leaders, just so you can kind of get an idea. And if we look at the overall batting leaders, Harold Baines actually is leading with a .400 average. These are qualifiers only, of course, in the American League. Ty Cobb is second with a .378 average. Then you have Lou Boudreau down through .375, and so on. In the National League, remember, very, very pitching-dominated league, Todd Helton leads in the National League with a .381 average, and he's the only National League player in the top 10. Slugging-wise, Babe Ruth leads with a .857 slugging. He also leads with a .450 on-base percentage. Now, he didn't do as well in Season 1. He really didn't, but Season 2, he's doing a lot better. Home run leaders, we have Dick Allen leading with 8 homers. This is through about 14 games, so that's quite a good pace. In the National League, you have Mike Schmidt leading with 5. RBI, of course, Dick Allen is also the RBI leader with 19. And Mike Schmidt is the National League RBI leader with 14. Babe Ruth has walked 11 times, which is why his on base is so high. Sammy Sosa leading in strikeouts with 21. Jimmy Fox leading the American League in strikeouts with 20. But Reggie's in there, as we would expect, with 15. Let's take a look at the pitching side of things, shall we? So if we look at the pitching leaders, we can see ERA, Juan Marichal, 104. Steve Carlton second, 182. Dominated by the National League. In fact, you have to get all the way down to number 10 before you hit an American League pitcher, and that's Jim Palmer with an ERA of 3. Sandy Koufax is leading with 38 strikeouts, with Steve Carlton just behind him. Bruce Sutter leading in saves with 6. Raleigh Fingers leading the American League in saves with 5. I like to look at base runners per 9 innings as a good standard to look at to see who the good pitchers are. Phil Niekro surprisingly leading with only a little over 7 base runners per 9 innings. It's pretty good. Mike Messina has allowed 7 homers, which is crazy. And then you see a handful of pitchers here with 3 quality starts. Once again, Phil Niekro, dominated by Houston pitching, of course. Phil Niekro, Bob Gibson, Juan Marichal, all leading, all near the top of the leaderboard in WHIP. Bob Feller leading with he's walked 18 batters so far, which is just nuts. Top 2 are New York Swats pitchers. Lefty Gomez is second there. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of where the league stands in terms of here at the quarter of the way point. If we look at home runs, Oakland, 27 homers, just almost averaging 2 a game, or right around 2 a game. Just very, very heavy, which is why they lead in slugging, 534 slugging. But anyway, you can head over to baseballmaelstrom.com if you want to follow the action and see some of these stats. You can delve in deeper of all the stats that are here. You also see, if you head over to baseballmaelstrom.com, you'll see the front page here. I do a little write-up on each game. For the POPs League, which is the Payoff Pitch League that I'm talking about, you'll see the standings below that, and then the upcoming schedule and past scores. I have other projects, of course, on here too. You can go see season 1 of this league. You can see I just wrapped up the Best of the 30s tournament using Season Ticket Baseball. I have a History Maker baseball tournament that I did like last year. You can see the stats for that. Everything is on this webpage that you can check out. So, how does, pardon my dog barking, Legends and Busts affect the league? Well, the Legends and Busts set came out recently, and it's really what I wished would have been around when I first started season 1 of this league way back when. You can check out a video here about the long time out of the park baseball online league that I ran with a friend of mine, Kamish Dugan. We ran that for over 10 real years. And that league was very much based on legends. So each team had a legend that was kind of the franchise player, if you will, of that team. So Detroit had Ty Cobb, for example, and each of the teams had a legend from their history, kind of the most noteworthy player from that team's history, if you will. And then as the season went on, more legends could be brought in so that there were legends playing alongside current players. So that's kind of gave me the idea for this league. I wanted to really see if Hall of Fame teams could face off against non-Hall of Fame teams, because there's so many great players not in the Hall of Fame. I figured that I could create a couple of teams of them and see how it went. And in terms of American and National League teams, it just so happened that there were 2 players at every position in the American League Hall of Fame and National League Hall of Fame, or, well, in the Hall of Fame that were an American or National League players. And so with Payoff Pitch, though, there was no Legends set at that time. So I was really limited to the individual season sets. And so I pretty much purchased every season set in PDF form. And then I took what I considered, and of course there's subject to debate, I took what I considered to be the best season from each of these players. And that's the season that they're in the league playing under, that season card, if you will. So so that's kind of how the teams got set up. And you can see here in green the year in question, and the blue and the red are players that are in the league. The blue and the red are. So, like Satchel Paige, well, that's not a good example. Hank Greenberg, 1940. So his 1940 card is the card he uses in the league. Carl Hubble uses his 1933 card. Bob Lemon his 1948 card. Warren Spahn his 1954 card, and so on. The limitation is that Payoff Pitch does not have every season carded. So sometimes I was forced to bring in a player with a season that wasn't really their greatest season. And just because that was the only season of theirs that I maybe had a card for. So some of the players, especially older players, where there aren't as many seasons carded, were forced to be brought in at non-optimal seasons, I'll say. So like Satchel Paige, which I mentioned before, the only season that he's carded is 1948. Well, that was when he was towards the end of his career. And so, he wasn't as great as he was when he was younger, especially like in the Negro Leagues and such. Likewise, if we scroll back up here, we'll see Ty Cobb. The only season back then that Payoff Pitch had is 1921. Well, Cobb played 1905 to 1928. 1921 he was good, but arguably not really his best season. But that's the only season that's carded for Payoff Pitch. So, as I said, a lot of these are just limited based on what season card I have. And then because of that, 1921 is the oldest season that's carded. A lot of the older players, like Christy Mathewson, let's say, don't have a card at all because they played, like Mathewson played 1900 to 1916. Well, there's no Payoff Pitch season card for him. So a lot of these older players were just left off the rosters because they weren't carded at all. Of course, as you head towards the modern era, it gets better because after a certain point, all of the seasons are carded. So the more modern players, I have an easier time having a card for them, if that makes sense. So that kind of gives you a little bit of background on limitations that I had setting up this season to begin with, or setting up this league to begin with. Well, now, also because of that limitation, take a look at the Boston's team page here, team spreadsheet. As I said, it just so happened to work out that there's about 2 Hall of Fame players at every position for 3 American League teams, to fill 3 whole American League teams and 3 whole National League teams. Just for whatever reason, there's exactly 2 at every position. The primary position, I'll say. So that's what I have, is I have 16 position players on each team. And unfortunately, because of limitations like I've already mentioned, I only have 9 pitchers on each team because of those limitations, like I mentioned. And so that's caused issues when I have a starter get shelled early on, because the bullpens are not very deep on these teams. There's only really 4 relievers on each of these teams. And if they're lucky, the 5th starter doesn't have to start very often. But most teams, that 5th starter has to start, so really you're left with 4 relievers. And a 9-pitcher pitching staff isn't very big. But again, I didn't have 3 more Hall of Fame pitchers to add to these in the American and National League to add to these teams to beef up the bullpens. That's where the Legends Bust set comes in. So Joe recently released this Legends of Bust set, Legends of Bust set 1. And this has, I haven't checked to see if it has every Hall of Famer, but I think it has almost every Hall of Famer, if not every Hall of Famer in it. So some of those old cards that I didn't have access to, like Christy Mathewson, like if I just look for Christy Mathewson, there he is. So Christy Mathewson has a card now, even though he didn't in any of the other card sets. Now Christy Mathewson has a card I can use, for example. And these cards are based on, well, they're mostly based on their career averages. Okay, so, but Joe says he's kind of beefed them up a little bit. So he started with their career averages and they're beefed up a little bit. Now, I don't know what process he used to beef them up or to juice them or whatever. But they're juiced or beefed up a little bit from what their career averages would suggest, which is great because an individual player's best season is going to be better than his average, his career average, of course, because his career average includes a bunch of seasons that maybe were at the tail end of his career or whatever the case may be. So the career average isn't going to be as good as his best season would be. So these should be better or closer to what their best season would be than a strict career average card would be. In any event, now that there are the additional Hall of Famers carded, if we go back to the player pool here, you can see that I'll be able to pull in enough pitchers to add to the pitching staff of these teams now. So like Cy Young is carded. He didn't have a card before. Joe McGinty, Jack Chesbro, Christy Mathewson is a big one. Three Finger Brown, Chief Bender, Ed Walsh. Those players are all going to be carded now. And I've kind of gone through already, as you can see here, and assigned them to what league they would be in. Most of these are obvious because, let's say Mathewson pitched, I think, every year in the National League. So he's going to be in National League, obviously. Most of these pitchers back then pitched, almost every season in the same league. I believe Cy Young is different. I think he pitched half his seasons in the American League and half in the National League. Of course, this was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. But in that case, I went by the team that he is listed in the Hall of Fame with. So he was listed with the Cleveland Spiders, which were a National League team. And that's what I assigned him to. And so this will give me a chance to add 2 more pitchers to every team, which will beef up the bullpens so that we have 11 pitchers on each team. That'll give 27-man rosters, but I'm not going to remove an extra player. I think I'm just going to keep it at 27. But I figure now that we're at the quarter of the way point, it is a fair time to bring in these new pitchers so that the rest of the season will be better in terms of pitching staffs. And the additional couple of pitchers will be a big help. If a pitcher's getting shelled, I won't have to leave him in as I've done in the past. So that's kind of what my plan is. You can see again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there was another NL pitcher down here. But I'll have 6 National League and I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 American League. So I'll have 6 American League and 6 National League pitchers, 2 for each of the Hall of Fame teams. And then, of course, I will also add 2 pitchers to the non-Hall of Fame teams, which generally what I do is they can't be in the Hall of Fame and they cannot be active players. They have to be retired. And I go through the wins above replacement ratings as a kind of as a general guideline on who the best of the best are. I look over at baseballreference.com. I look up the career ratings and see what order they're in to pick the non-Hall of Fame players, if that makes sense. So there you have it. Kind of a long-winded explanation, but for those of you who are curious, that's kind of what I'm going to do for the Baseball Maelstrom Payoff Pitch League moving forward. So these rosters will get rounded out with better pitching, or I should say more pitching, and that will allow for I think a better overall pitching experience because they'll have a deeper bullpen to tap into as things go. And the extra players are going to just be randomly assigned to teams, so that there's no favoritism or anything like that. They'll just be randomly assigned to teams, and we'll go from there. And then I haven't decided in the future if I will just switch all of the players to the Legends and Bust card for them, or just keep it the way I've been doing it with their arguably best season. Again, knowing that some of those old-time guys, they may not have been carded in their best season. So there's kind of a trade-off there. All right, long-winded explanation, but that's kind of where we're at with this league. I will be starting a second project with Season Ticket Baseball, Best of the 90s tournament. So be watching for that. I got a little prep to do on that one, though, before we can start that one. And what I usually do if I have two projects going at the same time is I'll switch off week to week. I'll do 1 week of one project, 1 week of the next. And regardless, every game gets a little write-up. You can always view the box score and score sheet for every game. So you'll always be able to do that moving forward. And so stay tuned. Consider subscribing if you want to follow this action, see the new projects coming up. I'm really excited about the 90s one coming up, and I'm really excited to add these players to this Payoff Pitch League Season 2. Love to hear your comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, have a great evening.